Welcome to the Stokecast, where each week we bring you an inspiring athlete, adventurer, or entrepreneur and dig into their stories and strategies for balancing work, life, and adventure while having fun and making a difference. I'm Jonathan Ronzio.
And I'm Emily Holland. Thanks for joining us today.
Let's get to it. This week on the Stokecast, we have Cody Townsend. Emily, can you describe your experience of first seeing a video of Cody skiing?
What? That was basically the experience. I was late to the game. You probably have heard this in other episodes, but I've skied twice in my life, one of which was just this year. And so I don't really know what it takes to be like a pro skier, or even a skier, really, for being honest. So I was doing my due diligence researching our guy, Cody, and I saw his best line ever for 2014, I think it was. And it's like through this, I don't even know the terminology. We'll put it in the show notes, which will be on the website. But I watched it in my car as I was not driving, and I literally said, "What the hell?" out loud, like yelled it. I was like, "There's no way he's going to make it through that crack. There's no way." And then he did, and it's rad. So that was my experience.
He survived, and 4 years later, we have him on the Stokecast.
Yeah, and I think the purpose of him surviving was really to be on the Stokecast, right?
Probably. Yeah. and to continue having fun with everything he does. So Cody is, self-prescribed professional fun haver, really. Yeah. And we had a great conversation, which you're about to dig into now, just about kind of Cody's life balance of his athletic pursuits and his outdoor advocacy and the political issues that he cares about and he's getting involved with, and just in general a great life lesson, which is just to be the best skier, or even outside of skiing, whoever's most successful is just the person that is having a laugh, that's having the most fun, that's smiling.
I took that away from that conversation too, and I had a much more positive day.
Yeah. So hopefully after this episode of the Stokecast, your day is super positive, you're having the most fun, and you're the best skier on the mountain. All right, welcome to the Stokecast, and we're here today with professional skier, unprofessional surfer, fisherman, and fun haver, also co-founder of Arcade Belts, Cody Townsend. And I grabbed that from your Instagram bio because it's I figured that'd be in your own words, short and sweet, and I loved it.
Yeah, that pretty much explains it. Thanks for having me, guys. Glad
you're here. We're psyched to talk to you. So yeah, let's dive in. Well, actually, let's give you a little bit background on who you're talking to. I'm going to throw Emily under the bus over here. No, I mentioned in the email that you and I were on Denali this time last year together and didn't know it. But Emily over here has skied twice in her life.
Oh no!
but is stoked
Cody.
on it. Like you were just getting into it this year, really, and loving it.
Yeah, I was more Cody. To give you an idea, I was raised in upstate New York, which I should have been skiing, honestly. But parents didn't throw me into it really, so more of a hiker, rock climber. But So I don't have a huge idea about Denali level, but I did see that best line ever video and doing some of the research for the call today. And I was in my car, just stopped. I wasn't driving. And I was watching it, and I literally exclaimed to myself, like, what the hell? This is crazy. So I was like, oh my gosh, this guy is so rad. I'm so excited to chat with him. But yeah, I totally, after the second time, I totally get it. I definitely did some pizzas and French fries, so I'm not looking as rad as you do, but I'll get there eventually, maybe, maybe I can get to that point at some time.
For sure. Well, there's a couple things. Is one, we're in reverse because I'm like just kind of getting into rock climbing.
Nice.
It's only recently that I realized I live in a mecca for that. And there's an incredible amount of very good climbers around here, so I just started picking that up, and it helps for kind of like ski mountaineering and climbing in the winter as well. So I'm kind of doing the same thing. I'm like struggling to do a 510A, like just hacking my way through stuff, but having a ton of fun on the way. So it also leads me, it's like I've always said this. It's not about, like, skiing's not about what you can do. Like the best skier on the mountain is a skier having the most fun, because if I'm out there and like just not having fun on any given day, and you're out there just like smiled from ear to ear and stoked on everything, really like you're doing better at skiing than I am, because there's no other point of skiing other than just having fun. Like it's got no greater purpose in life other than having fun and making people happy. So that's my theory with it. So whatever, if your pizza and french fries you don't think are up to par, as long as you're smiling.
I was definitely smiling. I got off a mountain, and the people I were with were like, so what did you think? Do you think you'll come back? And I was like, yes, I get it now. This is insane that I haven't done this until this point. I'm just so psyched to go back and get better at it. And yeah, I was smiling the entire time. So totally true.
So you were the best.
Yeah, I was the best. That's great for my ego. I love that.
For sure. And it's like, and the great thing about skiing these days is like the equipment has gotten so good. Like you can start to take into essentially like hiking. Skis are such a great tool to get into the backcountry and go hiking with now. Stuff is so lightweight, so good, so like versatile and move around in the mountains with, that it becomes like an unbelievable tool to move around in the mountains in the winter.
Yeah.
100%. So actually there's a couple things you touched on here. One is like the evolution of skiing and just your, the part you're playing in it. And two is you talked about how rock climbing is actually helping you as a skier, ski mountaineer. And I want to kind of, let's talk about both of those things. Like how is that multifaceted athletic approach really helping your skiing?
I see like my career's shifted a lot in the last few years, and I've gotten more into like human powered access and going on expeditions and, hiking and climbing for your own lines as opposed to using helicopters and, other means of motorized means. I still use it, but I'm kind of more drawn to hiking. So for climbing, obviously, the first thing is just the knowledge of the systems, like knowing ropes, knowing how to set protection, and just knowing how to get up a mountain properly in a safe way.
Yeah.
But the other thing I'm finding is it's climbing is so mental, and skiing is really mental. Like you're dealing with fear so often, and you're dealing with exposure so often, and how you control your mind in those situations becomes pretty important to success and to staying alive. So I'm seeing like some of those similar things in climbing, of just being like you're in a scary situation, you're on lead, and you have to like calm yourself and focus and get through it properly. It's the same in skiing, both downhill and climbing up for lines. So I like see a lot of the same sort of mental patterns in both of the sports. Totally different physically, obviously. Like we have a joke that we climb like a skier. It's like a hashtag, because we all have big asses and big thighs and like tiny forearms. So I go climb with my friend Emily Harrington, who's like a world championship climber, and she is just hanging on like a monkey, and I'm falling off at any time I have like a crimp. But it is kind of like, it is fun in that regard of like, I like saying it's fun learning something. Like it's fun to suck at something and fun to like kind of get through those beginning stages.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think you touched on something that I want to kind of hone in on, which is fear. And it's obviously scary to try something new, and actually your profession to many would be scary in general, but I'm certain that you have, moments in the mountains where you're like, is this gonna go poorly? Am I like, you use a lot of mental strength to get through it. So how do you break through some of those moments where you're like, should I bomb down this? I don't know if this is actually a good idea, or like I'm scared to do it. Might be bad idea. I'm trying to understand. Yeah, what are the tricks? Because I think those could transcend, like you're saying, like it's equally important for a climber or even like a trail runner who's just trying to mentally prepare for the struggle that they're going through. Like what are those tricks that you use?
I'd say the number one most important thing is that, well, one, it's not a trick, but the number one thing is it's like kind of collective experience. Like for me, it's like these baby steps through life to get to these points. For me, it started when I was 10 years old, and you're jumping off a 5-foot cliff for the first time, or I'm at my local mountain at Squaw, and I'm 12 and I do my first straight line through a narrow little chute that's maybe like 10 feet long. And then you just kind of start to work your way up through that. I wouldn't have, you don't go to ski the line that you were talking about earlier, the line of the year and the crack, just willy-nilly. It's a lot of process that got to that point. Even just for that line itself was a 6-year process of building up that experience to be able to be comfortable on a line like that. The trick in the moment I use quite often is drawing on that collective experience. Like I will quite often, if you just have this kind of fear that's built up, you're nervous, and you start to look down and you kind of like, what does this remind me of? Does this, and you're like, yes, this has that feeling of that one line I did. It's, at Squaw Valley or some other place. And that went really well. And I remember how that felt. And you start to kind of draw back on these experiences to really figure out like, no, this is something that's totally within my realm. This is what you do. That's like actually what I say quite often to myself is like, no, this is what you do. You are a professional at this. So you've done this your entire life. Like you trained for this. This is what you do. And you're like, yeah, this is what I do. So it like those drawing back on collective experience is kind of like my number one thing for conquering scary lines or whatnot, or getting above your fear. But that only comes with that experience. You don't just go do it. I would not just go drop in on an ultra marathon. Like I would spend a couple of years working my way there so that the day before you're kind of like, I am really nervous, but I've run 60 miles before and I've done this, I've done that. Okay, you can do this. So that's generally my trick to get through it all.
So regarding putting in that time and building that base of experience, man, you said 6 years leading it like that. That's when you first eyed that line? I
didn't actually eye that line. What happened was I skied a line.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, no worries. I skied a line in Nevada up in the Ruby Mountains called Terminal Cancer. It's this like pretty infamous couloir, super beautiful. It's like about 2,000 feet long. At narrowest, it's about 5 feet wide. It's got unbelievable walls. It's just like, it's such a striking line. And I had skied it once before and I went back with Jeremy Jones and he didn't know where it was. So I showed it to him. We climbed up to the top of it. And then he was saying like, let's try and ride this fast. Like most people kind of hop, turn, ski it slow over the course of 10 minutes. And he's like, let's ski this fast. And I watched him take off and just do these like little wiggle slalom turns on his snowmobile, but keep his speed and his nose down the fall line the whole entire time. So I was like, wow, yeah, like I'm going to try that. And I just kind of started to let him run and was just like wiggling my tails and keeping my speed, but was like hauling, and it felt like I was in like the final scene of Star Wars where you're going through flying through the Death Star, and it was just
great reference. Love it.
Yeah, and then I got to the bottom and I was like, that was unbelievably fun. Like holy moly, like I was just like, I was exhausted, but I was like, I've never skied something that long for that and that narrow quite like that. And it was that moment when I was like, you know what, I gotta find what I said to myself was like the man version of this, like the real version up in Alaska. Because Terminal Cancer, it's a cool couloir, but it's not super steep. It's not super narrow. I was like, I want to find like the gnarly version of that. And I spent essentially 6 years looking for that line. It's really hard to find stuff like that. And every time I'd go to Alaska, I'd kind of keep my eyes peeled and would find things. 3 years before I skied the crack, I found one in particular that I saw that was just unbelievably gnarly. And I went and scoped it out. I went to the top of it. I went underneath it. I ended up kind of thinking it didn't really go. And then the year of the crack was when I was flying around in the helicopter and all of a sudden spotted that and was like, wait, what was that?
I can't even imagine looking at that from the sky and being like, that's what I want.
Yeah, same on that.
It was like, that was, it was in my mind for years before that. So it was kind of this thing where it was just like, it was a build up to that process. Like in my mind, I feel like without even seeing it, I'd already skied it 1,000 times in my head. Right. So when I found it, it was like, that's it. I will say it was really hard to tell the scale. Scale in Alaska is almost impossible to figure out because you have no frame of reference. Like you look across a glacier and you look at a peak and you're like, oh yeah, that's like 1,000, 2,000 vertical feet. And then you get up there and it's 4,000 because you don't have any trees to reference. You know, that glacier you're looking across you thought was like a half mile wide. Well, it was 3 miles wide. So it's really hard to tell. I will say I saw a picture of me on top of it after I skied it, and I realized at that point how long and huge it was. And I've said this, I swear if I saw the picture of me on top of it before I actually skied it, I probably wouldn't have done it because I was like, oh my God, that thing was way gnarlier than I thought.
Hence my expression when I watched it.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. I think a lot of people had that.
Yeah.
But to me, it was like, it was just kind of a long process to get to that point.
It all led there.
Yeah, pretty much.
I mean, that was hard to believe now, 4 years ago, but still just so iconic and resurfaces at the start of every ski season and throughout.
Yeah, I know. I always see it pop up and, everyone talks to me about it. And it's funny at this point because I would say 90% of people know me for that line, and you ski your entire life, but I'm totally cool with it because it was a cool line and it was something that I worked really hard to get, and nothing had been done quite like that. So it's it was a cool accomplishment. It was also interesting too because I didn't know that there was going to be that much like hoopla surrounding it. I thought, I did it for myself. Like it was something I wanted to do. I wasn't like, oh, I'm going to win line of the year with this and get 10 million views on YouTube. It was just like, this is something I want to do. And then all of a sudden it blew up and I was very surprised. Like all of a sudden getting calls from CNN and ESPN. I was like, whoa, this was crazy. I didn't think it would be I thought skiers would be stoked on it, but not like kind of the worldwide population.
Well, regarding what people know you for, let's talk a little about that. Like, I mean, there's obviously that line, but then you've been in tons of other movies and competed all around the world. You were on the Freeride World Tour, am I right?
Yeah, I was.
And I mean, you've just been doing pretty gnarly stuff on the scene here for the last decade, and then even prior to that, before you really had a name out there, just being around squaw. Like, what was it like for you in growing up? Cutting your teeth around the mountain there, and then getting to where you are now.
Well, I mean, I was super lucky. I grew up at a place like Squaw, like my parents. I grew up in Santa Cruz and was just a full weekend warrior. My parents would drive up every weekend, and I was a ski racer at the time. And for some reason, I was doing pretty well at it, even though I was skiing like I'd ski 4 days a month or 8 days a month just on the weekends. Yet I was having success with it. But in the meantime, I was also starting to see magazines and movies pop up, and my home mountain is featured in it, and Shane McConkey is there, and I saw him in line yesterday, and Ken Kreitler, JT Holmes, Scott Gaffney. It was just like there was so many legends around Squaw, and I was there. So as I started to fall kind of out of love with ski racing, it was a really natural transition because I'd already been in love with skiing powder and jumping off cliffs, and I got to be kind of tutored by guys like McConkey and guys like Kreitler, and I would just start chasing those guys around. I mean, when I was 16, I actually chased them around to the point where they were like, "Hey, who are you?" And like,
Stop following me.
Stop following. No, they're probably stoked. They're like, "Who is this kid?"
You're like sneaking out from the trees, like, "Hey guys, can you please teach me?"
I would ditch training and then just go, find them, or I'd be like in the middle of training and see them. I'm like, okay, peace out. And
I love that image of you doing that.
And then they kind of took me under. They were like, all right, like if you can keep up, let's go skiing. And so I started skiing with them from a pretty young age. And I was, I learned everything from them. And, Squaw at the time was just like the epicenter of free skiing. It was where free skiing was being born. And then I just took a lot of influence from him. I mean, McConkey is still to this day is like my number one hero. Like he was the guy that defined the sport and revolutionized the equipment, and then looked like he had the most fun doing it. And so it made it easy to like focus my life on like, hey, it's about having fun. Sure, I was like, I want to be a pro skier, so I can do this more, so I don't have to work, and take away time from skiing. Like I want to ski every single minute I possibly could. But it was like, this is about having fun. So do stupid stuff, make fun of yourself, and laugh the whole way. It was really cool to grow up in a place like Squaw. I would say I am pretty much my personality and everything that I am today was because of growing up in Squaw.
No, I mean, so you decided early on that like this is what I want to do, and looking at those idols and saying that's the life I want to live. Has now that you are living that life, is it different than what you expected? Like when you were a kid, idolizing Shane and Kent and all them. Like how is being a pro skier today different than maybe when they were?
There's a lot of difference in the like minutia of the business and whatnot, but for the most part, no, it's exactly like I imagined it. I'm one of the luckiest people in the world. Like I get to travel all around the world in the hunt for good conditions, for challenges, for whatever I kind of want to do related to skiing, and make a living at it. It still kind of blows my mind. Like as I was saying earlier, it's like I'm at my house this weekend working on my house. To me, back in the day, I was just like, I want to just be a pro skier and just make enough money so I can ski as much as possible. I was waiting tables and bartending in the meantime. And then when I finally got over that hump, it was like, this is amazing. I can ski in the summer now. I can just do whatever I want, travel all winter. And now like I've been able to buy a house off of it, and I'm 35, and this is my career at this point. I'm like, oh, this has been your job for 14 years now, almost 15 years. You're like, this is crazy. Like it really hadn't changed from when I was as a kid. Like I've worked hard at it, and there's a lot of things that it can separate you, but for the most part, I was very lucky to be where I'm at.
That's awesome. You have such a positive energy, Cody. It's incredible. So I actually wanted to ask you, one of the things I was thinking about is, doing anything. I think you started skiing, at 2, which just like the picture of a baby skiing at 2 is just kind of like funny in my mind. But so you've been skiing, 33 years now? Is that right?
Yeah, that'd be right.
Well, happy anniversary on 33 years. But But so with anything like that you've been doing for that long, I imagine there's periods where you lack a certain motivation or you need like an extra kick in the ass to go do it during the day or something like that. Do you ever feel like that with skiing? And do you have, moments where you're like, oh, I kind of want to switch it up maybe for a little while or take a little bit of a break? Or is it just, like you say, you're just kind of living your dream? Like what are the moments where you're feeling, maybe I could switch it up today, or maybe I could, maybe I need a kick in the ass?
Yeah, totally. No, it's actually, I've definitely gone through that. One of the biggest things that I did was actually after the crack and after that line blew up, I had had this really weird feeling. Like everyone's going like, what are you going to do next? How are you going to top that? And, I'd been making ski movies in the same sort of fashion for about 10 years at that point, and I wasn't inspired anymore. I sat there that summer going like, I don't know what to do next. I did what I've been working on. I've done everything I've wanted to do in skiing. From the actual challenges standpoint, I was jumping as big a cliffs as I ever dreamed of, and doing backflips off as big as cliffs I've dreamed of. Been in Alaska 10 years in a row, and then skied what I thought was kind of my coup de grace style line, and that was what I've been dreaming about. And then that summer, I just didn't really have a dream related to that sort of skiing, and I noticed it was, my mind was shifting more towards getting away from helicopters, getting away from guides, and starting to learn to climb and climb for my lines and go on more expeditions and adventures and exploring new zones. And it took a big step. A lot of people said it was the wrong step when I said it, but the next year I didn't film with Matchstick Productions, the company that filmed the crack. I was like, I'm done. I I feel like at this point it'll be a job, and I feel like at this point, if you're not inspired to go out and do what you love, then it becomes just a monotonous job, and that's when your performance declines because you're just kind of doing it for the cameras. You're just kind of going through the motions. I had noticed I was jumping like 60-foot cliffs in Alaska and being on top of it, and I was like, okay, like, not scared at all. Like, I know exactly what's going to happen. I know exactly how it's going to feel. It's kind of going to hurt at the bottom, but this will be a good shot. So I go do it, and I'll be like, all right, next shot. So I really like switched it up. And, that's the beauty of skiing, why I'm so attracted to the sport, is because it is so unlimited in its ways that you can do it, from park skiing to urban skiing to big mountain skiing to ski mountaineering to just every little kind of minutia in between. There's so many different ways to challenge yourself and to kind of express yourself and to have fun, that I decided at that point it was time to shift. And although I've still kind of filmed for ski movies, it's a lot different than I have. And I've gone on, I don't know, 5 or 6 expeditions, and including climbing and skiing Denali last year. Like, that was never a part of my dream when I was a kid, to climb and ski. And in fact, I hated it. I thought it was really stupid, and I thought it was a waste of time. I was like, you're really going to climb all day so you can ski one line? Like, I'm just going to get a helicopter or snowmobile so I can do 10 laps. And I started finding the challenge in these other sort of trips. So that's really, it took me out of that lull, was just kind of shifting directions within the same sport. It'd be, as akin to a surfer. If you're a small wave surfer, competitive surfer, and then get into big wave surfing, or, you're a runner, you're a marathon runner, and then all of a sudden you get into trail running. It's just like you kind of get to reinvent yourself within the same thing that you know and love. So for me, it's been, I've found such a new lease on it, on my love for skiing, just because it's like there's this whole new world that opened up as soon as I started learning how to climb lines, learning how to winter camp, and learning how to go on expeditions and guide yourself in the process. So I think any athlete that's done something for a long time goes through those lulls. And again, the beauty of skiing is you can just kind of do something a little different within it.
I think that's a great lesson for people who aren't athletes too, right? I mean, anything that you're doing, you can get pretty frustrated if you're not seeing maybe the results that you want to see, or you're just getting a little bit. You're not charmed as you used to be by it. So I think it's a good lesson that you can just kind of shift your frame of mind, or shift the way that you're tackling it, and it might bring a whole new world of opportunities to you.
Which isn't always easy to do. I mean, totally that decision to not film with Matchstick the next year, and to kind of pursue a different style of the sport you had been doing your entire life, to challenge yourself in a new way that couldn't have been the easiest. I mean, were you nervous at all deciding to do that and getting into these bigger, more technical mountaineering lines and leaving behind the films that you had always done?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, everything to that point had proven that this was a successful path. So to leave that successful path is it's a hard decision. You're like, oh, you got to the pinnacle of the sport doing this, and now you're going to stop doing that? And you're like, yeah, I am. So it is it was a hard mental exercise to go through. And then there's people that were like, that is stupid. Why would you do that? You're at the top. And, even for myself, I didn't like climbing. I didn't know if I was going to like it. I'm not an endurance athlete in general. I'm a big dude, 6'2", 190 pounds. Who knows if I was going to even be good at this? So, yeah, it was a big kind of, it was a hard decision to go through. And, I've still kind of filmed a little bit, but as I've kind of now getting to this point where I'm pretty much going to stop filming in ski movies and 100% devote myself to more human-powered stuff and ski mountaineering, just because I'm finding such a new love for it and such a challenge out of it, that it's hard. It's just like when I was 21 and trying to make it in ski movies, and it was really, really difficult, and I realized how good these guys were to do what they did on camera. It's the same thing for what I'm going down now. It's not easy. It's like relearning the sport again. And, but it's definitely brought this whole new love for the sport again.
Now, what would you say to people that were questioning that decision, or maybe calling you a little crazy for moving into? And I mean, I'm sure people left and right might call you crazy for some of the things you do, but regarding this decision or decisions you've made like that, what do you say to the critics?
Well, I just drew back on one thing, and there was one truth that just kind of kept coming back to me. That was the reason why I ended up making that call, was that when I was wanting to be a pro skier, I was so unbelievably obsessed with it that I was just thinking about skiing at all times. And I was constantly just dreaming and working and training towards being better at that form of the sport. Whether it was gym time, whether it was trampoline time, whether it was going to South America, I was just hyper focused. And I noticed over time that inspiration was starting to wane, and then my skiing was starting to kind of plateau. I was every summer, all of a sudden, instead of in June, just oh my God, I got to go skiing. I'm obsessed. I'm thinking about it at all times. It started to push later and later in the season. And all of a sudden it was in December, and they're oh yeah, what am I going to try and work on or improve at this year? And it was for something like skiing and with these sports, I think you have to have these unbelievable passion and or drive to get to the top and the pinnacle. So when I realized I didn't have that drive and that inspiration, I knew I wasn't going to be successful at it. It is what drove me the entire way through. The reason why I'm a pro skier is because I was absolutely obsessed with it. I was willing to sacrifice anything for it and work my ass off to get to that point. So when I realized that was waning, I knew that something had to change. So it was just this kind of internal truth. It was a very kind of self-aware decision that I realized everything focused back on that if I wasn't inspired to do it, then I shouldn't be doing it. Otherwise I would be not successful at it.
So regarding those new ventures, how did you find skiing Denali? That's something that you had never dreamed you might do, and there you were a year ago on North America's tallest peak. I got to be honest, I was sitting in I forget the name of the place, but having a beer and a pizza and seeing that you guys got Messner and Powder the day after we left was just a killer.
Oh no, heartbreaking.
Oh man, that trip was amazing. I will say it was probably a really bad introduction to high altitude ski mountaineering for me, because it went so well for us. I
this is how it is all the time. It has to be just. Why are people thinking this is so hard?
I was there's all these horror stories out of there. We showed up, we summited on day 9. And we're out of there on day 10. And I got to not only summit in absolutely perfect conditions with not a breath of wind, got to the top, and then got to ski the Messner Couloir by myself in boot top POW for the first 2,500 to 3,000 feet. I was doing super G turns down it, and then got down.
Just crying over here. He's slowly crying.
It was all time. It was unbelievable. And I didn't realize how lucky we were. I was well, that's not that hard. You just hike up and you go to the top and you get to ski down. And then I was hearing yeah, it hadn't been skied in a couple years, besides earlier in the trip, friends Jim Morrison and Hillary Nelson, otherwise known as Hillary O'Neill, had skied it a couple days before. But I've heard it can be pure ice the whole way through on the entire season. So we had a lot of luck on our side. But yeah, it was amazing, man.
Even with the summit, I think there was a less than 30% or maybe around 30% summit success rate that year. You got lucky all around for everything there.
Yeah, no, I was actually, before the trip was going, I was trying to read some of the national park blogs, and I'm seeing oh my God, it's horrible. It's minus 30 and storming and everyone's stuck, and there's a 10% summit rate. I'm oh no. I'm do I really want to leave summer right now to do this? And then, we showed up, it got sunny, and then we didn't really see a breath of wind or really any ominous clouds or a snowflake the entire time. It was pretty awesome.
Yeah, Windy Corner did not hold up to its name that time.
No, no. It was like you're like, oh, I mean, gnarly. And we're like, yeah, we pretty much were down in our base layers around Windy Corner. So, no, we got really lucky. And it was a really cool experience just because, like, I felt some of those original challenges that I had felt earlier in skiing. Like, this is the tallest mountain in North America. Not everyone gets to the summit. There's a lot of things that can go wrong. And, I was working through that mentally and working through the physical side of it. And I will say our summit day was one of the hardest physical days I've ever had in my life. Like, going from 14 camp with skis on your back to 20,000 feet, it's not easy. It's a long hike. And, I remember at the last on Pig Hill, just like thinking, oh my God, this hurts. Like, everything hurts.
Oh, gosh.
I am walking slower than I've ever walked in my entire life, but somehow I just like keep going. Like, you can do this. You just keep going. And that, I didn't call it quite like an ecstasy when you got to the top. It was almost more like a relief. You're just like, oh yes, it's over. Like, done. And then you kind of get up there and you start looking around and the view is just unbelievable. And you're just like, wow, that was amazing. Like it's to me, again, it's like this, you say, oh, I got to the highest summit in North America. You're like, it doesn't ring, I don't know, it doesn't ring very important to me. It's more like just the moment of pushing through your own challenges and pushing through your own suffering to get to the top of something, whether it's a 20,000 foot peak or whether it's a 5,000 foot peak, it's kind of the same feeling.
Yeah, I mean, in mountaineering, I think like 90% of the time sucks, but you keep coming back for that, like that 10% of that realization of the euphoria and the accomplishment you feel when you can push your personal limits and feel that success.
It's like type 2 fun for the majority of the time.
Totally.
I think. Yeah.
Totally.
Speaking of that, I mean, obviously you learn that you got to keep pushing, and that the mountaineering is hard in an endurance way. But what are some of the things you learned on that trip that you're going to take into some of your future expeditions for ski mountaineering?
Well, I would say one of the most interesting lessons I had was that, and this goes throughout my career, but the mountains have a way of humbling yourself and checking your ego. One of the things through my career, every like bad injury I've had, every kind of like mistake I've realized was quite often related to ego. Like, you think you're like, I can outdo that, and then you can't. The mountains humble you really quickly. And so for that trip, what was really interesting was I was there with four other people, and two of the climbers were, Johnny Collinson. He's already done the 7 summits. He's just like he's a little racehorse on the mountain. He hauled us up the mountain. And as I mentioned before, I'm like a big guy, and I realized it was that trip where I realized like this my entire time of hiking, I always try and keep up with people, and I'd be suffering way worse and just like not having that much fun. And I've realized like where my strengths are and where my weaknesses are. And on the summit day, we went up from 14 to 16.5 to the top of the fixed lines, and we were going at a fast clip. Like, we were off the fixed lines, passing groups of people. And I just had this like feeling, I'm like, dude, we're going too fast. But it was my own ego that was trying to keep up with these guys who are totally different style of climbers than I am.
Right.
And I realized, I was like, no, it's my ego trying to keep up with them, and like, just hang back. Like, you don't need to keep up with them. The goal's the top, not hanging with your partners who are stronger than you to get to the top. So I slowed down. I let those guys get out of sight, and I just like kept my own pace. And eventually, which was funny, I was pretty much caught everyone after a while. And it was this whole realization that like, no, there's a difference between when your pace is related to ego, when your pace is related to the goal. And so as I like started to catch back up with everyone, because I was really strong and I was getting to 19,000 feet and feeling great, and everyone else was suffering way worse, it was this kind of realization like for the 4th time in my career that like ego is such a powerful it's like a powerful agent in the mountains, and it's the thing that gets you in trouble the most. And it humbled me again. And even though we got to the top, and you're like, yes, you conquered it or whatever, you could feel like, no, I actually came away from that more humble than I started. The mountains have a way of doing that, and I think that's why so many people are drawn to it. They teach you lessons that few other places in life could teach you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, how do you find your own pace that you can sustain, whether in the mountains or in life or business? Like, how do you dial in your pace?
Yeah, I think it's just from experience and for planning. Like, running a business at times, I was definitely running myself ragged and not, spending enough time at home, and, those things you realize. You're like, well, what's important in life? Just like, what's important right now? Is the summit more important, or keeping up with your friends more important? And you gotta reset the goal. You're like, well, for running a business, running a ski career, and managing a normal sort of life, you're like, well, the goal is to be happy. The goal is to live a comfortable life. So balance that. Don't let the fact that you're like, we got to be an unbelievably successful business destroy everything else in your life, because it can do that. So it's like keeping the correct goal in mind is really, really important. So for myself, that ends up what drives me the most and what makes the best decisions for myself.
Totally, man. Balance or burnout.
Yeah.
Right.
Do you practice any sort of like mindfulness? Do you use like goal sheets? What is your usual way of keeping that goal that you're talking about, the one that is supposed to be top of mind? Like, how do you do that for yourself?
There's no specific way other than the fact that it's just kind of, I guess I base my entire life on the fact that you just kind of like try and be happy. And, but like if you're doing stuff that's not making you happy, then you should try and maybe fix that. And then everything else around it is, like I've realized it's just, I don't have to write down my goals, because it's all of a sudden, if like there's something that's been in my brain and it keeps popping up and it keeps popping up, then you're like, well, then you're obsessed with that. You should do that. So that's end up how I make my decisions. Because, if I don't have to write it down and I keep remembering it, then it's probably something really important that I should do.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, kind of going back, and I don't want to belabor this too much, but we are talking about like individual sports, right? So like you do these things with other people. Obviously you have a team for mountaineering, you have, a belayer for climbing, you have a group of people you generally go hiking with, or if you're going solo. And it's super individualized in a different way. Like you yourself are in control of how good at skiing you are. You yourself are in control of how good at climbing you are. It's not like your partner is going to make you better or worse or whatever. But even though it's individual, I find that a lot of times is super competitive, right? Of course, you know that from competing, but just with like regular skiing and then with climbing and all these individualized sports, like how do you not let that take control of you? I mean, you learned on Denali to not let ego get in the way, but how did you do that when you were still like singularly focused on skiing, not ski mountaineering? How did that play a factor into your professional life?
I think it's surrounding yourself with good people. You can just tell the people in a team that are out there for the right reasons. It's very, very rare that you find people, I feel like, in these sports that are in there for the wrong reasons, whether that's like fame or money or sponsorship or anything like that. It's pretty rare to get that. I feel like those people end up not being that successful. But if you do find it, and then you find those people that share that same passion and love, and make them your partner. I have some pretty solid partners in all of these things, and I kind of stick with them because they're the ones that are going to help you focus. Like skiing is incredibly individualistic sport. You're doing it to make yourself happy, and in the moment you're the only one in control. But it's also like in the mountains, it's a really team-based sport because like you're not going to get out there without your team. You're not going to learn these lessons without your team, and you're not going to be safe without there. You have to work with the people around you really well. Just like in climbing, it's like everyone thinks quite often just a belay, you just hold on. You're like, well, no, if you're like trad climbing, a good belayer can make the difference between pulling your pro or, in decking versus someone that can catch you well. So it's the same sort of thing. Like, even if you're the guy not skiing the line, being that good belayer and giving the good beta and talking them through and being that positive motivation, all that kind of thing is really important to like stepping it up. Like we're so often so deep in the backcountry, like in putting ourselves in risky situations that your rescue is only going to be the people that you're there with. So you have to have confidence that those people are going to be there for you if, the shit hits the fan.
You're literally your life is on the line. You're roped up at times.
Yeah, you essentially are. Like, you're roped up by distance. Like, if you're on an expedition or even on a day-to-day basis where you're like sled accessing stuff or even ski touring on some big stuff, like you're far out there. A heli rescue is not guaranteed, and if it is, it's going to take many hours, especially in North America. So you have to have confidence, and working with your partners is incredibly important.
Now, what's your process for risk assessment? I mean, I think that all of us who are in this realm, these outdoor sports, have a different level of the acceptable risk that we're willing to have. But I think we all also have a bit of a problem that we try to push it a little too far sometimes. We're a little addicted to that adrenaline, and we need to be mindful of how to keep it safe and how to push our personal limits while not going too far. Like, what's your process?
Yeah, I know that's definitely the hardest thing out there. That's the thing I think you're constantly juggling with is like, how do I push it without going too far? I've lost too many friends in this sport. We went through a wave in our community where every year was losing friends, and it's the one I don't know if there's an answer for it. I don't know if there's any one trick to it. It's kind of almost like a cultural kind of thing that is maybe starting to shift to put safety in priority of progression. I don't know the answer to that. I'm trying to find that. And as I enter into ski mountaineering realm, I'm trying to find it even more, because here's a whole new realm that I haven't had as much experience as I have in pure downhill skiing. And I'm trying to figure out, like, what is this line climbable? Is that overhead hazard going to go right now? All these kind of things it's a hard line to walk. And, for myself, like, these days, my number one goal is don't die. And as much as that seems like kind of like, yeah, that isn't that the number one goal at all times? You're like, we actually have to put that kind of in the forefront, because quite often you can get sucked into having fun, pushing yourself, and putting it in front of your own safety. When you're young, man, like when you're 21, I get to say, like, I really didn't care about dying. You thought it was like, oh, it's just whatever, you just go away, and like, I'm just going to try and do the best I can. But as you get older, you realize you're like, no, like, I've got my family, I've got friends, I've got a community, and it's not me that's going to be hurting if I die. It's going to be my friends and family, and you don't want to put that on people. So it's a hard line to walk. I still kind of struggle with it.
Yeah, I think it's just in general, a lot of our sports have, as you mentioned earlier, you're doing it for you. There's a selfishness to our pursuits, and but the longer you stay in the game, the more mindful you become about how your actions influence others.
Yeah, for sure. No, that's the one thing I've always struggled with this sport, is like being at this point, you're like, man, this is a really selfish job. Like, all my only goal is to go have fun. That's kind of not really doing much for society at that point, which is why I'm trying to learn to give back in certain ways, whether, from the basic level is like, I look at my heroes and they inspired me to be a skier. And That's everything I know that's been good in life has come from being a skier, and everything I know and learned has come from that. So I'm thankful for the people that inspired that, and hopefully you can pass that along. But even from, making sure that you're working on some outside stuff of giving back to your community, giving back to the ski community and the world at large. So, you're not just on this 100% selfish pursuit.
Yeah, speaking of giving back, I know. So let's talk about arcade belts a little bit, and also I know you're fairly active in the world of having a voice for environmental activism. Is that true?
Yeah, I'm getting more involved with that. I'm definitely kind of more these days. I'm focused on the political spectrum. I'm working. I've volunteered and been working with a congressional candidate for the next upcoming election for our local district.
Awesome.
We have a guy who represents the Sierra, who is a climate change denier. He wants to sell off public lands. He is more conservative than Trump, and is in more lockstep with him than almost any congressman. And here's a guy that's managing the Sierra, and you're like, this is insane. So congressional candidates haven't been really that focused on. Everyone focuses on the president, but your local congressman can have more sway than just about anyone. So it was last year and last April when I saw two candidates pop up, and I did some research and I talked with them, and I was like, all right, I picked one, and I'm like, I'm going to work for you. And I was like one of her very first volunteers and one of her first kind of endorsements, as much as my endorsement counts. But as a local business owner and as a local athlete that cares about this place, I just started working for her, and I've been doing a lot of fundraising for her and doing a lot of awareness campaigns. And we have our primaries coming up on Tuesday. She is looking like she will get through the primary and face our current Congressman Tom McClintock in the midterm elections in November. So I've been really focusing on that because I feel like that has almost the most sway in our community. And, if we have someone in there that's going to be focused on solar projects, focused on the fact that climate change is real, that can maybe help reverse things. I don't know if it's not looking that great right now, but at least we got to do something to, fight for our mountains and fight for snow.
I love that. And who better to talk about climate change than a pro skier, right? Like, you see it firsthand, like day in, day out, how it's changing in all mountainous regions. And I love that it's a woman, too. Yeah. Love seeing more female representation in Congress. That's great.
Yeah, we have actually 3 candidates right now going up against our incumbent, and they're all women. It's awesome.
Yes.
They're amazingly talented, amazingly successful, incredibly smart, charismatic people. And the candidate I've endorsed and is doing the best right now is Jessica Morse, and she's an outdoors woman. She's hiked the John Muir Trail. She's grew up skiing around this area. She's like 5th generation to it. And then she worked for the State Department. She worked in national security. She's worked in Iraq on a civilian level. So she's gotten her chops pretty good, and she's awesome. pretty impressive. I hope we get her elected.
We will definitely be rooting for her.
So,
yes. Awesome.
So for anybody who is not, in your, who would be able to vote for your congresswoman or congressman.
Thank you, John.
What would you say to anybody else in the general industry about, like, what's the best, things you can do to get involved for fighting for the mountains or fighting for skiing, or just simply, like, being mindful about having a voice?
It's different. We kind of have these, not arguments, but discussions a lot. So, climate change has become a big issue, especially among skiers, and with Protect Our Winters being the main voice that's coming out of it, and having influence in Washington and on directly into people themselves. So, but the way you actually do it and fight for, let's say, climate change has become very there's a lot of different ways to do it. For me personally, I see the power of government being able to make the fastest changes. So that's where I'm focusing my energy. I have a friend like Chris Rubens who is really focused on cutting back in his own life, and he's done a ton of stuff to cut back his own carbon footprint and hopefully inspire people to do the same. A lot of people criticize us as pro skiers of like flying around the world, flying around in helicopters, and then telling people, hey, you got to cut your carbon footprint. And it's like, it looks really, really hypocritical.
Totally.
But there's people like Rubens who are starting to maintain a professional ski career without traveling very little, without going on airplanes, without getting on helicopters, and cutting his carbon footprint. And I see that he's made a film last year called The Curve of Time that was really, really powerful. And it's for him, it's working really well. For me right now, unfortunately, like where I'm at and where I am in my career, it's like not quite there yet. I'm like trying to do what I can, but I'm just not seeing as big a results as I would hope to. So, I'm working on the political spectrum. There's so many different ways you can do it. We're all just trying to achieve the same goal though, which is like, let's work for green technology. Let's work for green energy. Let's work for ways to set up humanity for the long run instead of what we're doing currently, which is on a path to destruction.
Now, did any of that play into your decision to try and go more human powered with some of your expeditions, or was it just more about the next challenge?
Yeah, no, actually, I wouldn't say it played in at all. It was mainly just the next challenges. I look at it now and I'm like, oh, that's a nice benefit. But again, it comes back to these passions and and being a skier. And you're like, I was driven by certain aspects of sport, and now I'm driven by this. Now I see it as a secondary benefit, and I'm happy to do that. And I think I've done one day in a helicopter in the last 2.5 years, maybe 3 years. So, I don't really fly around on helicopters very often, but I still have a snowmobile and I still use it for a little bit of the year. So, there's certain things that you could say are hypocritical about it, but, I'm trying to fight my own fight in a different sort of way. And that's where I'm really working on the political level.
Love that.
It's a personal battle.
Totally. Because for me, it's like, there's technology that's like, there's all of a sudden the big news is there's an electric snowmobile that's out there, and it's doing it's like got the potential to be a solution out there. But one of the things for me is like on the government side, if we continue to give tax breaks to oil companies, those kind of innovations are going to come much slower.
Right.
So if we give tax breaks and financial incentives to green technology, then those innovations will go much quicker. And then we can do what we all want to do, which is go out there and still have fun, but not have as much impact on the environment, which is just a total win-win. Because, the one solution, the thing with cutting back your carbon footprint is like the best way to do it is to become a hermit and go live in the woods. Well, what kind of life is that? If you're not out there inspiring people, you just kind of by yourself out in the woods, and you're like, great, you don't have a carbon footprint, but like the rest of the world still goes on. So right. We need to make up solutions on this macro scale that lead people to live the lives they want to live without having as much impact on the environment. We got to just shift, because we're not going to get the whole world to just be like, okay, guys, no more driving cars, no more flying around. Like,
just stay where you are.
Yeah, like no one, like so many things in life. Like, don't heat your house because it's bad. And you're like, well, what? Puffy at all times? Like, it's just not going to happen. So the more we push on this other side, I feel like the more we're going to create actual solutions that the entire world can adopt.
Yeah, so I think it's definitely a combo of like individual actions you can take that are reasonable, and it's not going to like completely leave you just sitting in your house with the lights off. Yeah, but also exactly. Certainly getting involved in like local elections and being understanding of that and giving your time and or money if you can to the candidates that you believe in that will help to push that message forward. It's awesome. So glad you're getting involved in that, and we'll definitely be rooting for her as well. Yeah. Kind of going off of that as well, I mean, we'd love to hear about how you co-founded, right, Arcade Belts, and how your experiences in the mountains led to you creating a business.
a business that gives back, right?
Yeah, totally. So the impetus for the idea was my roommate at the time, Tristan Queen. We were living in Squaw together, and it was my then girlfriend, fiance, myself, and Tristan, who's now my wife. But then Tristan and I would just sit there on the couch, and we'd always talk about businesses and certain ideas. And, I always kind of wanted to do something like that. And then he had this idea, and he's like, dude, no one's done belts before. And I was like, and yeah, belts suck. Like, we started talking about it. We're like, yeah, we take our like leather belt out of our jeans and put them in our ski pants. Yet everything else
It's exactly what I do.
I was just thinking, my boyfriend does that every time we go on any adventure. And I'm like, what are you doing? You just wore that to work, like today.
And it wasn't designed for that. Like, it was designed for your jeans or for going to work and whatnot. And we realized that like everything you wear is specialized for skiing except for your belt. And then we're like, yeah, and the leather belt, it's like always too tight or maybe a little bit too loose, and you still get snow down your pants, and then it breaks down. And then those like those Boy Scout style ones always shred and fall apart. And we're just like, wait, we got to create something that's like for this sport and for sports. And we stumbled across a Grundon's fishing wader belt, and it was like stretchy and it was comfortable. And we're like, wait, stretch, something like a better buckle. And we took that kind of idea and we switched it, made it for skiers, made a brand for skiers, made it the materials a little bit different, kind of created a different stretch, a different buckle. And then, it was myself, Tristan, and one other guy, David, aka Bones, that we were like, all right, let's make these belts. So we hand sewed 500 of them in our living room, brought them to the local shop, and they were like, yeah, we'll take them. And they sold out in 7 weeks. So we're like, oh, maybe we have something. And then it was just this slow kind of, we didn't really change our normal lives. Everyone kept their jobs, and then we just make another run for the next fall. And then it was about 3 years into that, we were like, wait, let's like do this, like real, like make this a real job. And those two guys quit their job. I obviously did not. And we started Arcade at that point. And it's been amazing. Like it's incredible. Like we have an office at the base of Squaw. We have 8 full-time employees, 1,500 retailers, and it's like a real company now. And we're still kind of like, this is like, it was real, because I still remember like sewing these in our living room and walking into a shop and having no idea what to say or what any of the terms and things meant. So
now, when did you start that?
We sold our first belts in 2010, and then I would say it was kind of like 2013 it became like a real company. And that was when like we hired our first employee in 2014, and I've just kind of grown it since. And you mentioned kind of like giving back. Yeah, that's been a big part of it too, is we, in those early years, you realize how much local support we had and how many people were like rooting for us and helping us along the way. And so as we grew this company, we wanted to make sure that this was something that we were giving back to our community for, like not just creating a company that's all about how many units we can ship and how many dollars we're bringing in. It was about creating a great environment for our workers. We pay a lot extra money in rent to be at the base of Squaw, but our employees on a powder day can just walk out the door and go skiing, and that is invaluable. For the community, like we want to make sure we're giving back. So whether that's for High Fives, we have a huge event that generally raises almost $100,000. We've adopted pipelines for water checks and pollution checks around Lake Tahoe. So we run efforts to essentially go test these drain pipes that go into Tahoe so that we can keep tabs on what the pollution levels are for the lake. We've made it essentially every quarter we have to do some sort of give back initiative. So we have a couple long-term ones, but every quarter we're going to make sure that we're doing one sort of initiative to give back.
It's awesome.
Dude, I love it. For anybody listening, the lessons you can glean from this this story here, You seek the opportunity out of your experience. You put in the effort and you developed that minimum viable product. You tested the market. You engaged the community. You scaled efficiently, and then developed the social responsibility plan. And bam, there's the company.
Oh, there it is. Oh, and it started in the living room too.
Yeah.
Just casual.
That's your roadmap, listeners.
Speaking of listeners, so if someone were to come to you and say, hey, Cody, I really want to get involved in skiing. I really want to start skiing. I want to get involved in the outdoors. Like, what is your piece of advice for someone to get involved in your world? Like, what do you usually tell those people that come to you for that?
Well, like the number one thing I always tell people, everyone, comes up, how do I get better at skiing? And I always tell them yeah,
tell me, Cody, please.
Be with people that are better than you.
There
and you just learn from that, like I did it at Squaw. Like if I grew up in some other tiny little mountain, I wouldn't be the skier I was because I was able to watch Shane McConkey jump off cliffs right in front of me. And I'm like, okay, I'll do that. And you just learn from people or the people that are surrounding you. So for even at the lowest levels, it's like go find mentors, find people to go do this with, and you'll get better at it. Like it was the other day, I was kind of laughing. I was like, I went out climbing. I was out with Emily Harrington, Michelle Parker, who's a professional skier, and then our friend Emily Turner. And they're all like, obviously Emily's a pro climber, but everyone else is a really good climber. And here I was the dude, like the horrible climber, like they're just like flashing up stuff. And
Hashtag
I'm like,
climb like a skier.
Yeah, actually. But it was like, I got better that day and I like made it through this one section I've never made out through clean for the first time because I was with them. And I've got better that day, even though that was my first day of skiing, because I'm with better people. That's, I think the key is just go out there with people that are better than you and don't be intimidated by them. Just go do it. Like, I mean, even to this day, like that day I felt bad. I was like hang dogging while Emily is hanging on to me and I'm like falling and falling. Like, Jesus Christ, sorry girls, I suck. But they were like, I felt bad, but they're like, no, do it, come on. And I was like, no, let me down. They're like, nope, I'm not letting you down, do it again. It's like, okay.
Yes.
And I went back up for the same route later that day and got it clean. I was like, oh, cool. That's my old truth of just go out with people that are better than you. It still works to this day.
Perfect. Absolutely perfect. Solid advice, man. Well, Cody, we've got one more question for you, but I just want to say thanks again for taking the time. It's been a real pleasure chatting with you, and it's been an inspiring chat. I'm ready to tackle my next business.
I might go skiing.
There you go.
Well, not here right now, but I will go skiing again this year because of this conversation. So
no, but it's been great, and no. So the last question is just, how do you define Stoke? What does Stoke mean to you?
Oh, Stoke. It's that moment when you almost can't contain it, where you're just like, you're screaming at the top of your lungs and you don't really know why. It's just all of a sudden the emotion is overwhelming you and you're just like ecstatic. Like that is Stoke to me. It's when you get down to the bottom of the line and you're just like, yeah, like you can't replicate that, I find, in many things. And I find that out in the outdoors. I find that in skiing. And it's kind of what we're always chasing.
I love it. Well, I want to take a second to just acknowledge you for your stoke on all things life, and think that if anybody listening is going to take anything away from this, a couple of your best nuggets were just do what makes you happy and surround yourself with people that are having the best time. So you do too, right?
Yeah. No, that's pretty much it. I guess that's a good way to sum it all up.
Thanks so much, Cody. We really appreciate you chatting with us.
So where can people keep up with all things Cody?
Usually, I mean, social media is a good way to these days. Obviously, I think Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook are all just at Cody Townsend, and my website, codytownsend.com, and got some things working on for the future. So yeah, follow there. Check out Arcade Belts at arcadebelts.com, and just follow along if it interests you.
Well, we'll be sure to put all those links in the page here, and I'm sure people are going to be stoked to follow along. So thanks again, man. It's been great chatting with you, and I look forward to staying in touch.
Likewise. Thank you guys so much.
So that was Cody Townsend. What a guy. I mean, that was just a fun conversation. He's super humble, but super passionate. I just loved it.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Really great dude.
So all the links that he just talked about will be in the show notes at exploreinspired.com/Stokecast. And if you want to continue listening to this, Jonathan, what do they do?
If they're on exploreinspired.com/Stokecast, they can find this episode and every past episode. And if they keep coming back, bookmark that page, you'll find every future episode. And that's a great way to listen to the show. But of course, you might be consuming this through iTunes or your favorite podcast app elsewhere. And just click subscribe to keep us in your life, because we want to be a part of this journey with you.
Please, we love you, and we want to keep talking to you.
Ridiculous. All right. Well, I hope after that you still hit subscribe.
I thought that was pretty sensual. I thought that people would respond well to it.
Maybe.
Yeah.
We'll A/B test it.
All right. We'll talk to you soon. Thanks so much for tuning in. I'm Emily Holland.
And I'm Jonathan Ronzio. We'll catch you next week with another episode of the Stokecast.